to the Masters of Modern. We have been gone for a while, but I am your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host, Ben Bateman.
What's up, guys? Excited to be back. Lots of cool Magic things happening. I continue my personal return, my return to my pure love of Magic. I play so much Magic these days, and it has been so wonderful to be doing it. And I'm really excited here to talk to you guys on this episode because there's a lot of cool stuff that's happened since last we talked to you. Some amazing previews. Alex and I actually got to go and do a social commander night with our friend Joe from Tabletop Jocks and a bunch of other cool folks the other night. I can't remember the last time I went to a social Magic event with you that wasn't like an event, just like a Magic night where we played Magic.
That wasn't at like a convent. Yeah, no, nothing.
I didn't even tell you.
In a while.
Digital, like 5
well,
years.
In my defense, I am a father now, and my availability to do anything is definitely much more limited. But yeah, no, definitely it was really fun. And we're in the midst of preview season. You know, we're the end of the, not the end, I guess, because Aftermath still happens, but the final main set of the Phyrexia saga, or the new Phyrexia saga, is in the midst of previewing. The story is done. We're waiting for Aftermath to see how the story wraps up. Controversial story, which we can talk about if you want. Then a bunch of new cards. We're gonna go over the mechanics, each of the key new mechanics for the set, as well as maybe some shout outs, some heaters we've noticed already in preview season.
Good ones.
Like some very cool cards, and obviously some game changing things in regards to a new entire card type, which we did shot call. Ben, I don't know if you know this. We did it twice. I did it once on TikTok, but then we followed up with it on the podcast. If you go to the January 24th episode and listen to the last 10 minutes of that episode.
The date.
Oh yeah, I have. I was like, I swear we called this. And we literally describe almost it's we basically go over like the four things we think a battle card is going to be, and we describe the fact that it changes, like like another player has it and different players attack it then own it. We talk about the fact that it'll act like a planeswalker. It'll be a loyalty ability card that you fight over. And then the one thing we had was that it had a static ability. So like if it had 7 loyalty counters or whatever they are, it'll give like all creatures +0/+7. And then if it goes down to 4, it'll be +0/+4 or whatever. We didn't have when you kill it, giving it to your opponent, you get an effect. But we had the loyalty countdown ability, and we had the like interchanging of targeting who controls it. So high five to us.
Can I ask a question though? Because I have not gone back to review the January 24th final 10 minutes episode. How much of that was you and how much was I involved in? Because I'd love to know. If you tell me that I was at least substantially involved, I'll be very happy. Oh no. Were you like, what do you think a battle's gonna be? And I was like, I don't know, man. You tell me is that kind of how it went?
Yeah, it's also like so also I posted I did a whole TikTok breakdown like on the 18th. So it definitely was like I like went over my 4 ideas in a different TikTok and decided to bring it into the episode. And it's at the very end of like maybe an hour and a half, 2-hour episode, and we are very tired.
You're very gracious that you teed me up there that I had to ask, because you made me sound really cool until I outed myself, which
you didn't have to bring it up. I was going to let you be. Yeah. We participated together. You definitely contributed to the conversation on, yeah. Oh yeah, that how that would work. And, but the other idea we had that ended up not being true was that they were going to be a third type of non-permanent spell. So like instant sorcery, and then a third thing, because sure. Right now that's all there are way more permanents than there are non-permanents. Well,
I appreciate you giving me credit there before I outed myself, but I was like trying to trace in my brain. I was like, do I remember having any opinions on this?
You didn't even know battle. In your defense, the way that like the segment plays out is we like review Atraxa last, and which our card evaluation on that card was just like not good. Like that card is good, and we were like, this could be a commander maybe, but I made you read the last 10 like the whole card, and then your brain like breaks mid card, being like, wait, what the hell is a battle card? And then I start speculating on what a battle card is. So you didn't know what was coming. I did get a sick review, like there's an honest reaction of you being like, wait, they're adding a new permanent card. That's very good. But we're very tired in that episode. So it's like, there's a lot of like, yeah, like it could be this. And you're like, yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, that would be cool. Cool. So, oh yeah, it could be this. Yeah, that would, so okay, but regardless,
It
battles here.
sounds like fascinating content to me.
Yeah, yeah. There's a TikTok that's way better. I shared it. But continuing the track record of us just knowing the future.
as a team, they previewed like I think I must have seen 5 or 6 battles today.
There are a lot of battles that have been previewed.
There's a lot of cards. There's a few in totally insane cards that have been previewed so far, and then there's a bunch of battles, a couple of which are quite good. But yeah, I like this set. It's exciting. I think without getting into the specifics right off the bat, I will say that the power level feels pretty high. I think that like there's a lot of really good stuff in here. I definitely have a few cards that I'm excited to talk about. Before we get into all of that, though, a big thank you to all of our patrons. There's a little segment with Alex and I doing our predictable dissection of the MCU, which we periodically go and do. You guys can listen to before this. We get straight into it. So thank you, everybody who is a patron and continues to support. As Alex mentioned in the section before this, with travel and everything lately, we've been able to do less of those because there's been more short form content and less long form content. It's just been harder for us to kind of create full hours. Like you have a child, and I've already, you know that my Marriott account already has 46 nights in 2023.
Really?
Yes. It's basically 90 days into the year, so it's why
half the year in Marriott's.
So anyway, it has been something that we have just not been in here as much as we'd like to, but we're still nothing is changing. We're just having to deal with fatherhood and the work schedule. But thank you to the patrons who have been here and we're listening to that. And a big thank you to our sponsor who obviously features us, TCG Player. Definitely, we love being a part of the network and we appreciate being involved. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. So first, let's talk mechanic, and we've already kind of touched upon it. So let's talk battles, because I think that's obviously the big new thing. Now, right now, battles are only set to be that we've been told set to be in this set. They're all double-sided cards, and they are sideways. And the battle mechanic basically reads, and these are all battle sieges. So that's the other thing that's important, is that the mechanical essence to what we know they do is based on the siege mechanic, because they have the keyword a siege. And so a siege is, I'm gonna have to turn my head sideways. A siege enters as a siege enters, choose an opponent to protect it. You and others can attack it. When it is defeated, exile it and then cast it transformed. And it comes in with a what is it called? It's not a loyalty. I keep calling it loyalty, but let me see the exact defense counters. And it enters with a number of defense counters. So it acts like a planeswalker. You're casting this card, it comes into play. You choose a player to defend it, but in reality, they kind of like gain control of it, right? A player now has it, and it has a health. And if you attack it enough for a health to go to 0, you then get to benefit. So you get it, it transforms and flips over. Right now, the way it works is if any player attacks it, you still get to cast the transformed side. So you are still the beneficiary of it. It's not like a multiplayer effect where, like, if I cast it on Ben and Joe attacks Ben and kills it, Joe gets to cast the card. It's still my card. And often they either have cast triggers or ETB triggers when you play them. And then when they flip, there is a benefit permanent that you get to control.
Yes, it's a really exciting mechanic. And I feel like the first time we had a permanent type that was introduced that was not traditional, that had counters, was Planeswalker, right? And this came out like 15 years ago, I think, or a little more than that actually, in Lorwyn. And we all kind of looked at it. We're like, okay, so you have like a thing that comes down on the battlefield and like this has permanence on it. I don't know really how it works or what it does, but I guess I'll attack it instead of a player and like whatever. Now, as the years have gone on, like we're all very familiar with planeswalkers. They're very balanced for the most part. Every once in a while, we get one that's broken. So with battle cards, they're interesting. There is sort of a combination of like, they're almost like 1/2 planeswalker, 1/2 saga is what they feel like when you first read them.
Yep.
They have the element of there's loyalty on these things. And then the back half of them, once they flip, is they have this like something happens when they enter, and then there's like, sort of saga / creature or whatever. There's been a couple really good ones. There have been some more like limited focused ones, I think, so far. We'll probably talk about one or two of
Well,
those. And
there's a ton of them, right? They range at every rarity. There's planeswalker ones, there's creature ones, there's instant sort, like basically every card type has shown up on the back of one of these.
but I think the thing that is most significant about these cards, and the reason that the design is so interesting, is this is a significant new card type, like a change in card type that is specifically designed to have a different experience if you're in 1v1 or multiplayer. And that's like the last time we got like a new card type, really, I guess, or like a new, because Saga wasn't really a new card type. I mean, Saga was just like an effect that was based on enchantments. Vehicle.
Last time we got a new card type was tribal and planeswalkers. They came in the same set.
Yeah, I mean, Planeswalker is the last one. I'm just trying to think of something that was like a new idea that was significant. I guess like
sagas and vehicles, right? Like those are the two real ones.
Exactly, sagas and vehicles, and they're both kind of riffs on other things that already exist. Planeswalkers don't really have a different relationship to a 1v1 game versus a multiplayer game. They're not templated that way. I mean, obviously they affect the game differently. This does. This is a battle card specifically is templated to say, if you play this in multiplayer, it's going to be interesting and it's going to have lots of interaction with the whole table. If you play this in 1v1, it is specifically referencing only your opponent. Both are relevant, but the card is going to function totally differently. And I think to me, that is a fascinating concept because the way it's designed, it wants to straddle those two things. And that means that evaluating the power is really hard. It's very hard to look at these cards and know, is this great? Is this really bad? Are these all mid? I'm not really sure. But
yeah,
because it's designed to span it, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I'll say one thing. I would bet one of these cards gets banned. At least I would bet one battle gets banned. I'll bet you $10.
You have an idea which one so far, or no?
No. I have no idea which one. I'm saying just like historically when Wizards has made new mechanics, right? Because like to your point, okay, so outside of the core card types in Magic history, there's almost like a secondary tier of like core card type that exists where it's like still a subset of another type, but it does something different, right? Auras are one of those, which kind of are their own card type. Equipment and vehicles are both that way. Planeswalkers, static ability planeswalkers, sagas, companions. Like these are all things that like are functionally new things within the rules of Magic.
Even if they're on existing things, yes.
And
agreed.
Every single one of them caused the banning to happen other than Aura. All of them, right? Every single one of those I listed had cards banned because they were too powerful. And so that's where my prediction comes from. Who knows if it'll be actually true, but that's my guess is that this is such a different type of thing that and that happens for two reasons. One, because when Wizards makes a brand new sexy card type, they want it to be exciting for people. So they make the cards good, right? They're like, okay, we want these to be played. We want this to be something that people want to play with. We don't want this cool new card type to be a dud. We're going all the effort to make an entire new card type. We have to like rewrite half the rule book to make sure it incorporates this to be a part of it. And so these better be seeing play in at least most of the main formats. And B, at the same time of them wanting it to be good, they have the fact that knowing how these function in the wild in a balanced, learned way based on the team of at most 100 people they have on their testing teams, which is way high. It's not 100 people. Is unrealistic. Like there's no way they're going to catch every in and out or how toxic or not toxic. Like they didn't do it like with vehicles. They didn't do it with equipment. They didn't do it. Like it's always like these corner cases that are weird and interesting. And a lot of them, it's also like weird changes last minute, right? Equipment was they made Skull Clamp minus toughness instead of plus toughness because they thought it was too good. So they made it worse by giving it as, +1, -1. Broke the card in half. With vehicles, it was I believe Thopter wasn't, or Looter Scooter, Smuggler's Copter. Like I think it wasn't it was just like an attack trigger for the loot. It wasn't like an attack block trigger or was a damage trigger or something along those lines, and it wasn't doing enough. So they made it like trigger on attacking and blocking versus on damage. So like there are often little tweaks that make them just so much more dangerous. So I wouldn't be surprised if they get banned.
The concept and conversation surrounding these because they're fairly complex cards, right? Like they have two different sides. The front side, in the same way that a planeswalker has to generate value that is similar to a sorcery speed spell at a similar cost, the planeswalker version of like the minus is always going to be sort of a little worse because it'll be more expensive than like that ability. The way that like the original Kiora is just basically like the minus is like explore, but like Kiora costs 4. So like stuff like that, these sort of are going to have a similar thing because the upside of getting them is high enough. But you just sort of have to then read them and gauge, okay, can I live with whatever subpar thing I'm getting on the front half? How versatile is this thing on the front half? And then if it goes my way, just how insane could this be? And then the last piece of it, and we'll talk about this when we get into the specific cards, is what things already exist that the best ones of these interact with that take advantage of the mechanic and just blow them out of the water. Because there's already a couple things when I've read them that I'm like, oh, that's extraordinarily good.
The fact that Vampire Hexmage flips any of these automatically.
I mean, that's the first thing I was going to mention a second ago.
Yeah. We can talk about that. I didn't want to talk about like, I don't want to review like Invasion of Fiore yet. Like, right. Talking about the fact that you can interact with these cards in interesting ways outside of the normal offers a bunch of cool opportunities. You know,
I think let's focus on what you just mentioned, because I think that actually that particular factor is something that applies to all of the things we're going to talk about. So Vampire Hexmage, obviously black, for a 2/1 first strike creature, you can sacrifice it to remove all counters from target permanent, which means any of these that come down with a Vampire Hexmage in play, any of them, it can sacrifice and immediately remove the counters to flip it, right? The same way that you can do that with a Dark Depths and get the token. One of them, one we're going to talk about later, is a creature tutor, so that's interesting. But the fact that any effect in the history of Magic that removes all counters from permanents, or all counters from target permanent, or X counters from target permanent, are going to interact with these cards very favorably. Hex Parasite is another one. Like Aether Snap is another one. There are a bunch of cards that do that, and that is a unique effect that has not had a ton of applications. This new card type is specifically interacting with those types of cards. So I think that in itself is a really interesting piece of this. Because
on that note, I'm not like willing yet to predict this. I could see Vampire Hexmage getting banned in Modern due to these cards. If there's enough ways that it interacts with them that breaks them in half, I can see Vampire Hexmage getting cut, because like, and in the same way that like Bridge from Below was cut right before they got rid of Hogak, where like if like Modern gets broken in half for the next 3 months because there's like Hexmage battles are too good, they'll ban Hexmage first, see what happens, and then they'll ban the actual problematic battle, right? We'll be like, Hexmage is banned because battles, right?
It's just going to come down to how good are the battles. Like if they're good enough that without Hexmage they're already insane, then it's like it's a guarantee. If it's
I agree. But if that interaction sees play early, I can see that being the first. I think I can see them hitting the enabler first before they get rid of battles, because they don't want to like have the bad PR of like, we had to ban a battle. But kind of going back to something you said early on, though, what I think is really interesting is that these cards do need their own card type. They're not like sagas. They're not like equipment where this could be a subtype of Planeswalker, right? Where like the fact that I give it to my opponent and I now have to attack it. I don't give it because to clarify, you still control it. You choose an opponent, but it's under your control. But the fact that I am now attacking it with my creature, then they have to block it, right? That does not work like anything else currently in the game. The fact that it is like this card type that sits into play, I think it's also like they like looked at, you know, the line between artifacts and enchantments is thin, right? For a long time, Wizards refused to let color artifacts be very common because that was one of the only differentiators between them and enchantments. And enchantments to this day like aren't allowed to tap, right? That's a enchantment cannot have a tap ability. That is a piece of enchantment, because if they did, then they now are artifacts. That's like an artifact thing. And so looking at the design space, they built a lot of these rules against loyalty counters and permanents with loyalty on them. and the ability to attack separate permanents. And this is the first time they've like, okay, can we lean into this in other directions? And I think it's really cool to see that something creative. And I think these are very versatile as permanents too, because I mentioned earlier, these are all battle sieges, right? Battle dash siege. But the versatility of the core of this permanent type is much wider than when this enters play, choose an opponent, they defend it, you attack it. If you kill it, it flips over, right? That's a lot of things that could very easily just be, if it was a battle tower, it could be you play this, but you don't choose. You're the opponent. Your opponent can attack it. It basically acts like a planeswalker, but you get a benefit from it, and it doesn't have to take it down. It just sits there. That was like our original idea, right? And then there's the other version of you choose your opponent, but there's no backside. It just has a static effect. But if you kill it, you get to draw a card or something like a smaller benefit but lower loyalty. Or you choose an opponent and it has a negative effect and it's on you and they attack it and you can block, right? There's so many little things you can do with it that are like a totally versatile world.
Because there's like the version of this that's like black 6 and it's like loyalty 10 and it doesn't have a backside and it's like the first player to reduce this to 0 wins the game. Like there are like the capture the flag sort of element of these cards that I think are like very doable. That's like really cool and fun and simple and
people have talked about like cool multiplayer versions, right? Like an initiative version where basically like the last person to do damage gets control over it and now gets the benefit from it.
I think the thing about that I like so much, and this is really where, many of the folks that we like that design these cards are folks that we know socially, or we'll see at the events and we'll get to play like Commander with or whatever, right? And like, so we kind of know the sensibilities and like the types of cards they like and whatever. Like, so it's not like the people who design Magic cards are mutants that are in a lab somewhere and they just like think like in math. It's like they love the game just like you do, just like I do. Like they really truly love it and they want to geek out and nerd out about it. I think those people are just as excited as you and me about the idea of, I want to make a new type of card that when I play it immediately engages everyone on the table in a positive way, in like there is a battle now going on over this thing. So obviously the version that we're talking about that could eventually exist of either player gets a benefit from attacking it is great, but also the version they just introduced, which is like, I'm putting this cool thing on the table. I've invested resources into it. I'm now going to make you think about how are you going to interact with it. And like this card that was in my deck is not a sorcery, like a saga. One of my complaints of sagas, one of the things I don't particularly love about sagas is that they're a lot of text. It's a little hard to track. And they're also sorcery speed permanents that come down and they don't feel like you have as much control of the game. They're a little automatic, which I don't think it's like cool. It's just not my favorite part of Magic. I like when I play something and I feel like the next time I have priority, I'm going to be able to interact with it the way that I want to. And sagas are a bit hard to do that with. You kind of have to accept this is going to go the way of the card. And a battle is very similar, but it's exactly that one difference. I'm going to play this thing, and if I get what I want out of it, it's going to be just what I want. But you can interact with it, right? Like each turn, each of us is going to think about how this thing is going to be affected on the board. The backside, the cool thing I hope to get out of it, is going to be the same anytime it flips. Which, by the way, one other aspect of battle that I think is very cool, you mentioned earlier, is when it flips, you can cast it. It doesn't flip like a saga and become, or I should say, it doesn't flip like most flip cards and transform. The flip on a battle is it flips it and cast it without paying its mana cost, right? Or I guess it's just cast. I don't think it says anything about mana cost because there is no mana cost. But specifically, battles flip and have to be cast. So battles on flip can be countered, correct?
Yeah, then you cast it transformed.
Okay.
So you can counter the backside too.
Yes. So I think that's a really cool aspect of these cards. You put the resources into the attack, and then the thing gets, reduced to 0, and it flips to be cast, and now you're tapped out. I spell pierce it. Like that's super cool. Except I guess if it flips into a creature, then you couldn't do that.
Well, and that's kind of like when I said they can be banned. Like this, I could see them being banned, which I still think is true. But these are easier to balance straight up than a planeswalker, right? The costs to them are very different, and you can do cooler things with them. The front side of a battle can be much more powerful than the minus ability on a planeswalker, right? Because you can kind of be like, the cost to get to the other side is high. Having to, like, every battle ostensibly says get this thing, gain, and then if you want this other thing, gain your opponent this much life.
Right.
Right. And that is a cost and is hard to get. And a lot of these cards might just see play as just, no, I just want to play. And then there's a few that I can point at. I just want to play the front half. I don't care about the back half. Right. I'm never going to attack into this thing. I'm going to use it because it's a decent removal spell. I'm going to use it because it's a decent board wipe. I'm going to use it because it does this. And then like 1 out of 4 games, I'll realize my opponent like doesn't have blockers to block it, and I can kill it in like one swing and gain the benefit, and it's worth it versus doing the damage to them. And so I definitely see a world where these are a little easier to balance or a little easier to understand what the cost is. And that's why I point at Vampire Hexmage as being a thing that could get them banned or get Vampire Hexmage banned, because that gets around that feature, gets around the difficulty of getting these to flip. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I feel like the front half conversation is interesting because you look at a very basic saga like the Birth of Meletis, right? Like the uncommon white one that gets you like a plains in your hand, and then it makes like a 0/4, I think. Maybe draws a card. I can't remember exactly, but that card is like, from a value perspective, it's like high enough that for 2 mana you can just justify it, right? Like if you play it, you get a land, and they kill you the next turn. 2 mana to get a plains is still, it's like good enough that the upside is there. If you get the whole way, fine. And I think that like the design of Magic has leaned more towards cards like that overall. I will say that from a personal player perspective, I'm not the biggest fan of cards that are good enough on their front half that the back half is just gravy. Because I think like there's this inevitability factor and this sort of grind factor that cards like that will look at most cards that are a 1-for-1 value and be like, unless you play me at the right time, I'm going to be better than you. That was always my problem with like Uro. It's the same problem I kind of have with like Omnath. Like a lot of cards like that, where it's like they come down and they do something good enough on their front half that the next time you get to do something, they're just so nuts. And then like past 2 more turns, and it's like the game is basically ended because and like it's weird because like makes me think of Shieldred, which are like, you know, the most recent one from Dominaria United, which is like so good, right? Like it's a black 2 legendary 4/5 that whenever you draw a card, you gain 2. Whenever your opponent draws a card, they lose 2. The card wins the game on its own. The inevitability of that card is so good, but it's also like the difference between that and a lot of the other ones I'm talking about is like what that card is on its face value is pretty simple. It's a legendary 4/5 creature for 4 mana. So 4 is already a pretty heavy investment for a card that if they kill it before you untap is bad. Like you've spent 4 mana for a creature that didn't do anything for you, right? I have way less problems with cards like that than I do with cards that are kind of inexpensive, that get you something marginal when they come in. And then if you're able to get there, they just feel like you have better cards than your opponent. That's the difference. So I guess with battles, my hope is we don't get a ton of them where the front side is like, oh, wow, this is shockingly good for its mana cost. And now if I'm able to get there, this card was so much better than the cards in your deck because it has way more depth than your like 3/3 creature for 3 that does a cool thing that I'm going to kill. That's like my one thought, because I can see the design space and I can see like where that design space leans, but I also know from having seen my least favorite version of it, the way it makes Magic games feel. So that's my long-winded sort of, you know, appraisal of battles.
The next one, the easy one, is transforming double face cards. Classic, more like not modal dual face, not the day and night version, so not the werewolf version of the mechanic, but the classic Innistrad one where they'll have activated abilities, etc. The big thing that we're seeing there is that a lot of the Phyrexian side cards are like this regular card and then this very expensive but with Phyrexian mana activated ability of an alternate color that switches it to a gold card. So Heliod is an example of that, or the new Atali, where on the front side it's like an Atali variant based on the original legendary dragon, but then you can flip it and it becomes Darksteel Colossus on the backside. Not an actual Darksteel Colossus, it's like, but it's an 11/11 in fact indestructible trample. which is cool. So the next ability is backup. And this one's actually a lot sicker than I normally consider this type of mechanic. So most sets have the combat matters mechanic.
Mentor or something, yeah.
Melee, mentor, and almost always they're like the most forgettable part. Honestly, if you were to show like 6 of them to me with just keywords and ask me like, can I tell you the difference between melee and mentor? No, I can't.
They are usually like, if you attack with another creature that has X power or less or more, it gets a +1/+1 counter, or like all creature gets +1/+0, or
all 3. Yeah.
Something like it's like some sort of like 1 to 2 creature or more thing that rewards you with power, or like scry occasionally draw, but it's very like
sometimes it's specific where it's like, yeah, +1/+1 counter if you attack with something weaker than the creature you're attacking with. Sometimes it's like open-ended where it's like you get a benefit if you attack with 3 creatures. You could scry, you can draw a card, you can do 3 damage to a thing. The rare one does like something insane, and the common one gives a +1/+0 to a creature, right? Like it's all relatively generic.
It always requires attacking and at least 2 creatures is the point.
Yeah. Backup though is in that similar space, but backup reads, when this creature enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on it for each of the number. So if it has backup 1, you put 2 +1/+1/+1 counter. If it has backup 4, you put 4 +1/+1 counters. +1 counter on target creature. If that's another creature, it gains the following abilities until end of turn. So basically, if you choose the creature that you can target itself. So it can enter as a 5/5 if it's a 4/4, or you can target a different creature that maybe doesn't have summoning sickness that turn. And then it gets +1/+1 in this case, because it has backup 1. And then it gains the abilities beyond that. So in this case, it gives target creature flying, first strike, lifelink, and +1/+1 forever. And so it ostensibly kind of gives the ability of haste plus clones the creature into 2 places. And there are some sick variants of this card coming out, this ability that we've seen already.
It's a pretty cool ability from that perspective you're talking about, of like what you normally get, which is generally speaking like an ability that you're mostly going to pay attention to the commons and uncommons, because the rare version or the mythic rare version is usually not awesome because of that. It's usually because it has that and something.
There's normally like one aggro deck playable 2 or 3 drop rare, and then a bunch of limited only cards that are relevant, and that's it.
Or they'll put the good ability on like a 6-drop angel or dragon that's like, oh, cool. But like it's already pretty good without it. And like it's not about that ability so much. It's about the fact that it's like a power card that has a cool thing. So what I think is interesting about this one, which you're describing, is that like, because of the fact that when it comes in, it gives the counters and the ability, if you choose another creature, correct me if I'm wrong, permanently. Like you said that, right? It's not.
No. It gains the abilities until end of turn. It gets the counter permanently, but the abilities until end of turn.
Okay. When you said it, I was like, wait, I thought I knew what this did. So, okay. But even that, like if it's backup 2 or something, you're making your 2/2 creature, your limited whatever, even if it's like a good creature in play, significantly bigger. And like you described, a lot of the abilities are good. It's not like vigilance until end of turn. It's like several abilities, because the way these cards are templated is that they are good cards. Like a lot of them are rares and have a lot of cool stuff going on. So if you don't give to another creature, they have to be good enough on their own. That's why
like Boonbringer Valkyrie, if you play it and you target itself, is Baneslayer Angel.
Right.
It is a 5/5 flying first strike lifelink.
Yeah.
For 5. That is a Baneslayer Angel. Or you can have it be a slightly worse Baneslayer Angel and be a 4/4 flying first strike lifelink, but then make whatever other creature you have in play a Baneslayer Angel for a turn. So it's a Baneslayer Angel with haste. So if you have like a 3/3 in play, you know how a 4/4 flying first strike lifelink for a turn, you gain 4 life, and then you have a 4/4 forever, and you have a 4/4 flying first strike flying. Like it. And this is like the generic one, right? There's one, Valdarin Thrill Seeker. It's 2 red for a Vampire Warrior 1/1 backup 2. So you can put 2 counters on it. So it could be a 3/3, or you can give it to something else. And then you can sacrifice, and then it gains the ability or gives the ability 1, sacrifice this creature to fling it. So this has the ability to like come down, turn your big thing into a fling while it gets +2/+2 and attacks that turn, and you still get Thrill Seeker, which could be another ping for 1, or you can build on it, like stuff like that. There's so many fiddly things that you get for like hacking abilities onto other creatures that I think there's some really cool stuff we're going to see with this ability.
This card also has like a standard combo that was like discussed, right? You saw that?
No.
Thrill Seeker, because Yargle has 18 power, right?
Oh, it's literally right next to Yargle in the preview. Yeah. So it's you play Yargle and then you play Voldaren Thrill Seeker on the next turn and you just dome them for 20.
For 20, yeah. Like it has like the fact that Yargle has 18 power and that this has the backup effect means that like you can just do it. You have to have the mana for it, obviously, but it's quite good. Yeah, I mean, I think that look, I don't think backup is going to be, the delve. I think backup is a cool ability that I like the way it's designed. I think it's interesting that it interacts in a favorable way that doesn't make me feel like I'm playing, one of these normal sort of aggro things.
I think it falls it falls in if we're scaling all abilities, it's real close to Exalted for me.
Exalted's really good, yeah.
Right? Like that's where it hangs out, right? It's like it is one of those generic combat mechanics, but because it's added to cards that like it's kind of a freebie and it's like super versatile in how it's powerful, that's kind of where it feels at home to me.
Yeah, I think that when newer players learn how to play Magic, there are two types of cards. There are the types of cards that you draw them and you play them and they're rigid and they feel like they are simple and they only fit into the way you have built this deck, your green-red deck, and it does this thing. And then there are those cards that are obviously more complex and they have more going on and they, generally speaking, are less expensive and they are more like free-flowing. They work together more easily. And I think backup for me feels like the type of effect that is going to pair with other types of cards more easily. It's not going to be as rigid as I think some of these others. Like you talk about Mentor and some of those others, and it's like they really don't feel like I can play them effectively in strategies other than aggro strategies. That's all of those abilities. Whereas I do think backup is like the one extra mana you might have available might mean that this is going to go on to that one creature, and then the one mana is going to combine with that creature's thing to do something really cool. And that, for me, is fun for a newer player. It means that these cards feel like they'll probably work together nicely and be a little less rigid. At least that's what I would hope. It seems that way, though.
Yeah, no, and like I'm just like, also as a mechanic, it's like sounds like so versatile in a cool way. Like imagine like a Llanowar elf that's a 0/1 but has this.
So
early on, it's a Llanowar. It's 1 green for a 0/1 tap for a forest. But late game, you can play it, and then it's basically free because you can give another creature the ability to tap for mana that turn.
So it'd be like a 0/1 elf for green that has backup 1. So like a 1/2 Llanowar elf basically is what it is if you play it on its own, which is like how much better is that actually than Llanowar elf? It is strictly better, but it's like not that much. And then like later in the game, you play your creature for a green, and whatever creature you have now taps for 1 green. You've upped your Gaia's Cradle count or whatever, like whatever cool thing you've done. Yeah, I mean, yeah,
like it's weird, right? Like you could do cool stuff with this mechanic that I think like. Even if it's like the 2 mana variant of that, to make it like not better than Llanowar Elf, because what we described is just better than Llanowar Elf, or it taps for colorless, or it taps for another color. But it could be like what you described as a rare, right? Like what I described as a rare, right? Make it the noble hierarch of this set is 1 green, taps for green, has this ability.
I think that card would have to have Defender. My one thought. I think that's an elf, the Defender 0/1 elf.
What if it's not an elf? What if it's like a druid Phyrexian?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay. Well, yeah, but other than elves, how many 1/1 Llanowar elves have we had for 1 ever? I mean, you have the cards like
Noble Hierarch, Goose.
Yeah, but Hierarchs is 0/1s. Yeah, okay, that's your point's fair. It could be a rare. I think
this would be a very good card, right? This would be a tournament staple in many a format. But they print tournament staples in many a format.
I think that's the only thing. I think if it was an elf, you can't make a card that is strictly better than Llanowar Elf. I think that's the only problem. It's like But I hear you. I think it's a very cool design. And if we shot called this right now, I can't wait for the next episode.
All right. Incubate. So Incubate is the next in a long line of investigation, treasure tokens, blood tokens, food tokens, and it is an incubator, is a token artifact incubator, and it has the ability inherently, like clue tokens have the ability inherently to pay 2 mana to sacrifice the draw card. This is pay 2 mana to transform this artifact. They are double-sided artifact tokens. And then the backside is a 0/0. And the ability many cards will have would be incubate number. And so if something has incubate 3, you make the incubator, artifact token, but it comes in with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. And then for 2 mana, you can make it into a 3/3 creature.
What was first, clue or treasure? Was it
treasure?
I think it was clue. Was it for sure?
Yeah, gold technically was the very first. This was a trivia question on one of our episodes. Is what was the very first ever? Gold
has
Makar, right?
Or maybe it's Makar, not Makta.
Yeah.
Okay, so treasure happened, and then okay, so
it was Guild and Makar came out within 2 sets of each other, and they were making gold, and then they made it treasure. When they realized that they wanted it to be tapped because they knew that Kaladesh was going to be in the same standard environment as it, and they realized improvise with treasures or improvise with gold was too powerful, so they came up with treasures.
So what's interesting is that like now that you have incubate and you have this effect where it's yet another of these 2 mana like static artifacts that can like do a cool thing for a cost. I wonder if when treasure was implemented, I wonder if the thought was this is going to be the new like template for Magic. The next 10 years are going to be like, we want new players to get used to there being these like sort of artifact eggs on the battlefield that have like something you can do with them. And there's going to be a whole bunch of versions because now you've now got, obviously gold's not a real thing, but treasure, you've got clues, you have food, you have blood, you've got these incubate tokens. That's 5 prominent inventions. You do have power stones, which are not quite the same, but like
no, I think they are. I think they're in the same category. They don't have the sacrifice ability, but neither do incubator tokens.
Yeah, power stones though. I mean, they're like it's a token in a pack. Like
there's weird ones too, right? There's rocks, and then there's mines from the one that like they make mines that you can sack to do 2 damage to an attacking creature, or the equipment one, which is rocks. There's servos is another one, shards, which is the enchantment one that Nico Eris makes. So they play in this space. There's
shards are weird.
Tezzeret makes doesn't Tezzeret make like treasures, but Tezzeret makes treasure. There's a Tezzeret that makes treasures, but they're not called treasures. They're called like power crystals.
I was gonna say like shards and power crystals. That all feels like it's in the same category. I do think servos and thopters, those are like specifically creature tokens. Like creature tokens are their own beast. That like
the reason I would include servos. Sorry, finish.
I think that like historically dating back to forever ago, if you make a creature token as a permanent of any kind or a spell of any kind, like they're token versions of the most common thing that new players understand, which is I'm going to play this thing, it's going to attack and block. I think these other ones, they were like a newer invention that I think new players are very familiar with.
So the one reason I would say servos fit better amongst them, and I agree with you, creature tokens don't count in the same way, but because of Fabricate from Kaladesh, right, where they came out inherently as a part of a mechanic, and that mechanic triggered in making them, and then they were used more as like a specific resources where cards would have like specifically sacrifice a servo or sacrifice an artifact creature token, like that to me played a little bit different than just like a random mirror token or a Thopter token. Yes. But I agree. That was like the first step. And then we've gotten farther and farther into really cool stuff.
I I think so that's where I was like sort of thinking about this. And I was like, okay, these are, because, it sounds like maybe tonight we're not going to get into like full card previews. There's a bunch of interesting cards that get into these. There's one incredibly powerful card that references these. The one card that I texted you yesterday about was Elesh Norn. The new Elesh Norn is bananas, and it's actually pretty par for the course that we have not had a bad version yet of Elesh Norn, which is pretty cool. Like most Legends have bad versions, or at least kind of cumbersome versions. The original Elesh Norn is so iconic. It's so good. The second one was totally nuts, like incredibly powerful, like controversial. And I gotta tell you, I think this new one, that when it's a whole crazy thing we're gonna talk about, but when it flips, it makes 5 of these. Like, is so good. I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that any of these 3 Elesh Norns have been anything less than remarkable?
The first 2 are obviously bonkers. This one, I actually was, when you texted me, I was like, oh, cool, the new Elesh Norn. I read it and I was actually pretty disappointed. So
Really?
I'm interested to see, well, because the flip it, you have to sacrifice 3 creatures and pay 3 mana. So to like actually flip Elesh Norn on this side is pretty hard. And her other static ability, whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you or a permanent you control, that source control loses 2 life unless they pay 1, is like, maybe it's backbreaking. Maybe I'm just like wrong, and that ability is like really, really good. But like it feels a little bit like worse Ghost.
Council?
No, not Ghost Council. Worse propaganda.
Sure.
Right. Like and so like I've played there's a white wall, I believe it was a wall from New Phyrexia that had Phyrexia mana. Players had to pay Phyrexia mana to attack you, basically. And I've like never ever played that card because it's always like
or something.
What? Say it again.
It's called like Norn's Annex or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's literally Norn's Annex. You're right. And so Norn's Annex, and like it's basically this ability. I think this is like kind of a reference to Norn's Annex, right? It has like colorless Phyrexia mana, like prevent damage to you, or whatever. And I'm kind of like, maybe but then if you flip it, the saga is very good, right? I do think incubation tokens are a little bit of a side swing away from blood tokens. I think they're better. Like I think they're being costed more comparably to food tokens, right? Where wizards kind of consider them useless, where like the rate, like for instance, Traumatic Revelation, which is the card they previewed, like you still get like you get a 3. I don't know. I feel like you're getting a lot of free ones of these. Like these are being added on in the ways you mentioned. You get 5 of them, right? But like how good is 5 of them?
Let's talk about what this card does, because we've kind of talked around it. So this is a legendary creature for Phyrexian Praetor 3/5 Vigilance for white 2. So it's a 3/5 Vigilance Elesh Norn for 4 mana, right? Like, okay, that's castable. Whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you, not combat, to you or a permanent you control, that source's control loses 2 life unless they pay 1. So it's got a little bit of like protection. They have to work a little harder. Then for white 2, sacrifice 3 other creatures, exile Elesh Norn, then return it to the battlefield, transformed under its owner's control, activate only as a sorcery, so you can't do it like end of turn sort of a thing. It's a little bit cumbersome. However, the flip turns into a saga called the Argent Etchings. First mode, this is when it flips. Incubate 2 5 times, then transform all incubator tokens you control. So when this flips, you make 5 tokens that are 2/2s and flip them immediately. So it flips and makes 10 power right away. The next ability, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain double strike until end of turn. So all of your creatures become 3/3. So now you're attacking
double striking. Yeah.
If they don't have the ability to block, you flip and you attack and you just win because they're all double striking. So that's 20 power right there. The last ability is destroy all other permanents except for artifacts, lands, and Phyrexians. They're all Phyrexians. Exile Argent Etchings, then return to the battlefield under your control. So now you have that same front side ability of 3 mana and sack other creatures. You can go ham and do the whole thing again. So my like feeling on this card is that, like, again, we're comparing this to Shieldred, which to me is like the gold standard right now of inexpensive, incredibly powerful Praetors. Like, that card is so good. That card's obviously better on its front side. It doesn't need anything else. You just play it, and then as soon as they untap, it's good. This card requires a little bit more work, but let's be honest, classic Elesh Norn requires 7 mana, so it requires a little more work too.
Well, it doesn't, though.
Cost 7, so it requires more work. That's my point. Then 4.
But it doesn't cost 7. It costs a spell that reanimates it. It costs a burial rights or a persist or or not specifically not a persist, but
okay, your point is fair there. But I guess when I look at this card, what I think of is okay. So I cast a 3/5 for 4. If this is put into a deck that is taking advantage of that side at all, they either have to kill it, or the next turn I'm going to get 10 power. And it's not 10 power they can interact with very easily. It's 10 power they have to wrath.
Well, you have to have 3 creatures, right? They have to have 3 additional creatures.
If this is in the right deck, how hard is that? If you're like, let's say you put this into a token shell as a 2 of, like, any tokens shell whatsoever. I cast this. And you've already gotten like a bunch of like Lingering Souls tokens and other things and anthems.
Yeah, but if you have a instant speed removal spell, you pay 3 mana, sacrifice 3 creatures, you can respond and kill it. Kill Ashnorn in response.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I do agree with you that this card is fragile, but I still feel like the upside is nuts on this card.
Yeah. I mean, like the cost is so high because if you can get to the other side, it's bonkers. Like Jin-Gitaxias is exile Jin-Gitaxias, then return to the battlefield transformed on it. Like there's no, you have to have 7 or more cards in hand. So I guess that but that's like a thing that's a little bit more accomplishable to me than. But I think all the Praetors are going to be really hard to flip. Like, and they all have like I win the game on the other side in a lot of ways. But
like I remember like when like Nicol Bolas, the Ravager, maybe the one from like the core set a few years ago, the 4 mana like 3/4 flyer, I think it was.
Yeah.
4/4 flyer. And it would come in, your opponent discarded a card. It was like a 4/4 flyer. And then I think it had the flip was like 7 maybe.
Yeah.
And it flipped into like a really good card. And I remember thinking, okay, so like this is totally like reasonable on the front half. It's like good, it has value. If you combine this with like at the time I was trying to make it in like a Training Grounds deck, I was like, so maybe on turn 5 you just like you already have Training Grounds in play, and now you flip this card. The backside's crazy. I remember thinking about that and being like, okay, if you take advantage of that in the same way that Elesh Norn would want to have 3 creatures, how good's the backside? And I never was able to make out that Nicol Bolas work. I was never able to like build the deck successfully, and the card ended up being bad. So maybe based on that, this card is a mirage. It may be. You could be right. I just when I thought about the back,
I think like in Standard, this is worse than Shieldred, which is like a very high bar, hard to pass. And I don't know if I would play this over regular Elesh Norn. Or whatever, middle Elesh Norn. But 4 mana is not unreasonable, right? Especially at the top of an aggro curve. It does do a little bit to like make your opponent's life harder to kill you. And if you flip it, you win. In Modern, I think it's just stone cold unplayable. Not stone cold unplayable, but I don't think it's very good. Or it doesn't make the cut. Pioneer, I think it also doesn't really make the cut. In Commander, I think this card's very cool. Like, I think this is a cool commander too, because like I think in Commander, this is a card that if you play as your commander, people will hate you out of the game. They'll try and kill you first, because I think like what it does is relatively unfun in that format and not that hard to accomplish in that format. So I don't know. It's a hard one for me to evaluate. It might be great. It definitely feels like a role player in Standard regardless. But it'll be interesting to see how much play it does. And part of me feels like when I read it was like, oh, they made the last Elesh Norn a little bit weaker, partially because in the story she is weaker. Like this is the turning point in this. Like they win against Elesh Norn here. And B, because like how many good Elesh Norns do they want? It also is possible that this was made for Standard, other Elesh Norn was made for Commander, and they push it a little harder than they meant to or whatever. But we'll see. I know that the middle Elesh Norn was supposed to be 6 mana, and they changed it to 5.
I guess with this card, like what I'm talking about, like let's just say this is in a tokens deck and like you play it and you're able to play a good enough deck where this is just the topper. I guess there's a version of like it flips and it makes 10 power and your opponent's like, I'm a turn away from killing you, so I don't care. Good for you with your 10 power. And like I can see that being sort of the like, it's like, again, it's sort of like a mirage, like what it gives you. It's like not actually that affecting of the board. Both the front side and the flip, none of them do something. None of them like make it so that like your opponent sacrifices 2 creatures, or like your opponent can't play spells, or like it kills all of your opponent's things. They're all sort of that offensive frontside way. I can see that even if you get the thing going could be underpowered, but it just feels like I don't think that sacrificing 3 creatures is that hard, and it just like makes 10 power, and then the untap is like I attack for 20. I don't know.
You do if they are tapped out, you do sacrifice 3 creatures and gain 3 creatures and gain 2, right? You net 2 creatures out of the deal.
Yeah. And like but like that I guess that's my point. Like the upside's real high, so if the thing that takes advantage of this is good, then it's going to be very good. But sure. I hear what you're saying. I do think the other 2 are probably better.
But I think like incubate in general, I'm always really high on these type of artifact token making mechanics, and I think that an incubate creature has a lot higher upside than say a blood token did, right? And I thought I was higher than anyone on blood tokens, so
we love blood tokens. Sorry,
but I think blood tokens was just I think because the problem with these, all of them, is what cards are they on, right? To your point, there are already some pretty close to totally busted versions of cards playing incubator tokens. And so with that in mind, I think they're just great, right? With blood, it was very obvious that they were like, we underestimated these. Food was too good. Let's make these worse. And then that hurt the mechanic, I think, because just none of the cards that played blood tokens were very good. So that's all that's going to matter.
Yeah, I've built a lot of Magic decks in a lot of formats, and I basically never looked for a card that plays blood tokens.
I am excited for like what's like the opposite of an academy?
Academy Rector?
No, like emotionally, like a dropout manufacturer.
Oh, sure, okay, yeah.
that has like blood incubator tokens and rocks or something, right? Where it's
sure, yeah.
It's like in Modern Horizons 3, it'll be the inverse of Academy Manufacturer, where it made food, clue, and treasure. This will make blood incubators and whatever the third one they decide is.
It'll cost 2 because they're all bad and no one wants to play them.
It's like way less push, so it's like funny that it's like I think it could cost 3, because like one of the powers of Academy Manufacturer isn't that the things that they're making is good. It's just like anytime you make one of them, you get 3 artifact tokens.
Yeah, all 3 of them. Busted. Yeah. It only would matter that one of them was good, because like that's the point.
Right. I think that would be really funny if we got just like the opposite trio.
Magic's winning to the point that like I bought another Horizons 2 box like 2 weeks ago. I got it on like eBay for kind of cheap, like
okay,
definitely $100 or more less than I bought my last one for, because I was just like, I want a Ragavan or something. It was like bad. I opened like nothing, but the tokens, you open like so many clues and food, and like they're all foil, they're all sweet. And I like everyone I opened, I was like, this is going into a sleeve. This is definitely going into a deck box. This is like really dope. There's a big focus on those tokens now being cool and relevant in a way that like, you know, a few years back, like when that stuff started, it was not like I'm going to save these foil tokens and be excited. It was like I'm excited now. I like want to have a full box of them in every single deck box.
Yeah, it's like it's Power Stone, Blood, and Incubator. That's the 3 things you get.
There you go.
Perfect. I'm gonna make it. It's like on like a card editor and post it on the internet. All right. The last mechanic is a returning mechanic. That is Convoke. There's a lot of like mini returning mechanics. I mentioned like there's an infect creature, but it doesn't have actual infect. They like read out what infect is. But Convoke is back. It was kind of the idea of like it's the groups working together. It's one of the best mechanics I think ever created. Super excited for that.
Yeah, I mean, Convoke is great. Obviously, anytime you ever see a card, it always depends a little bit on like how expensive is the card actually and what color is it. That's always the question, because like, you know, Obelisk of Erd or certain cards like that are like incredibly cool because they're colorless, and then you have other cards that, you know, the big green ones that are like anthems and make tokens and things like that feel very on brand. But I don't think Convoke is a mechanic that like Making creatures is so endemic of Magic's history. It's hard to make lots of them. Like you can definitely make lots of tokens, but it's a real effort to make an insane number of tokens. And so I think that Convoke is not something that can be easily broken. And I think that like
Yeah.
that makes it a fairly easy evergreen mechanic that you can throw back into things. It's difficult to like make a mistake on that one.
And there's definitely some like cool uses of it in this set. Like, anytime Convoke uses an X spell, an X cost, that's always like really interesting, right? I think my favorite so far is Hoarding Broodlord, and it's a dragon. It's a mono black dragon for 5 black, 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 7/6, and it has Convoke. And then when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may play it. And then spells you cast from exile have Convoke. So it gives the thing you tutor for Convoke, and then so it's like basically an instant staple because already there's a 7 mana but playable in Commander demon that when it enters the battlefield tutor. This puts it in the exile and then like has like an exile tribal thing. So any of those like impulse red cards, Ragavan, like all of that gets the benefit from this type of effect. Now you want to be able to play an 8 mana Convoke Dragon.
Sure.
But
Sure.
in Commander, if you're reanimating it as a reanimator target, it's very cool. Like I think it's a pretty cool effect on both sides, which I really like. So I think they're playing around with Convoke in interesting ways.
Yeah, I mean, Convoke's obviously it's been expanded to other effects that are similar, right? Like Improvise is very similar these days. They're both kind of riffs on. They're not the same. They're sort of riffs on affinity. They're like affinity plus something.
Yeah.
And I think that Magic has looked at all of those things and done a pretty good job with it. So I like Convoke. I've never found there to be a Convoke card that I was like, this is insane, but like insane in like a I wish this didn't happen way. I mean, Clever Concealment, I'm pretty sure, is a card, like a white card from Commander that came out lately that is like another cool, fun card in a multiplayer format that takes advantage of the same mechanics. So I have, at this point in design, a lot of faith. The cards with Convoke are going to be pretty balanced. I don't think we're going to get like something that is like offensive, you know? I think that's like
I mean they're being creative. So like, there's a free counter spell right with Convoke, Elegant Denial, which is cool. But you can also loot with it. There's Knight Errant of Eos, 4 white, human knight Convoke. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 6, and you can put any 2 creature cards with mana value X or LS, where X is the number of creatures you convoked with. So there's like cute things that it's doing. I don't know. I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty excited in general. I guess the last mechanic, which we really didn't talk about because it's not as mechanical, but it does have an effect to the mechanics, is the team up cards.
Oh, sure. All of the combos.
Yeah. So like there's a bunch of cards, like a big theme of this set is a lot of the creatures are actually 2 creatures on 1 card. So an example being Thalian the Gitrog, which was like one of the first that they previewed. That card's bonkers, and it has the second Thalia card, so all creatures and non-basic lands under the play tapped of your opponents. And then it has like Gitroggy mechanics where like you draw a card, we sack a land when it enters play, you draw a card whenever you play a land, right? Thalian the Gitrog is first strike Death Touch for a 1 white green black 4/4. First strike Death Touch being famous because there are very few creatures that have both. Glissa the Trader being Glissa in general being famous for being one of the few that has it. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. And then when Thalia and the Gitrog monster attacks, sacrifice a creature or land, then draw a card.
There was a non-text version with foil that was previewed today that was so sick. Though.
Yeah, so sick. The game yeah. It's if you win the game store the in-store championship or whatever, you can win it. It's on my list of things to pick up. But there's a bunch of these. All of them are really really cool. They're all like inherent callbacks to the like original 2 creatures combined, which I think is really cool. It's something they were able to do in a really creative way for a lot of them. Another one is like Rankle and Torbran, where you have like the Rankle mechanic where like whenever Rankle this deals combat damage to a player, you can choose one of their abilities. And it's so for them, it's their flying first strike haste. When Rankle and Torbrand deal combat damage to a player or battle, choose any number. Each player creates a treasure token. Each player sacrifices a creature. And then this is the Torbrand ability. If a source would deal damage to a player or battle this turn, it deals that much damage +2. It's cool because they have first strike. So they'll do their first strike damage. You can choose that last option, and then the normal strike damage will happen with the +2 effect from Torbrand. So really cool stuff. I'm super hyped by this set. I think there's like some downness on the lore right now because of kind of the way stuff has been released. But I mean, if you want to hear a recap of the entire story of what's gone on in this set, we have a playlist on our channel called March of the Machine story recaps. I literally go through every single chapter that they did. It's about 14 episodes. Highly recommend it. It's a fun blast. You can hear me. I also maybe recommend like you read each one as you listen to them. If you want to know what happens. But yeah, this what are your thoughts, Ben, before we kind of wrap up?
My first thought would be that Alex is genius when it comes to the story and the set and the revealing everything, because I see all those posts and you just know everything, which I'm like kind of amazed by. So if you guys want to like know it, like watch his stuff, because his passion is like you can't manufacture that. I think that my opinion of the set and the cards, I think that I'm 80% stoked. There's a small part of me that feels like they're jamming so much into this, and it's a little gimmicky with like the combos of the characters and the reference to all the different planes, that I hope it's not just like it doesn't end up just being like a smorgasbord of like, it doesn't feel exciting in retrospect. It feels like too much. That'd be like my sort of one comment. There's just like so much going on in this. I see a lot of the comments. I see a lot of the previews, even the combinations of characters, and some of them, it's like, this is cool and fun, but if I don't know the story, it's sort of like stapling this one character with this other character, and cool, new card. And like, if I don't know the story, then I'm like, but those two characters are really iconic and cool. Why am I getting them on the same card? And like, there's a little bit of that I think that as a fan, if I'm not a gigantic story fan, that I maybe feel like the set is trying to go for too much. But currently, the way I feel is that I really like the card design. I think there's a lot of really cool things going on in here. I think that we talked about battle a lot. I think it's really awesome. Overall, most of the characters I've seen that have been combined, I have been pretty excited for their cards. I think that like Phyrexia, Phyrexia and Brothers War both felt more purely exciting, maybe, or something. I'm not quite sure why I can't say. This set just feels like they're throwing the kitchen sink. And there's a part of me that when I see the previews, I'm a little skeptical. But I like a lot of the cards. I do. I think they're very cool. I hope that when I open the packs and I play the set, it feels as cool as I hope it does. But just there's some small part of me that right now feels like there's too much. It's hard for me to get excited about some of these combos or some of the things, because it's like the set is trying to do like maybe a little too much. I don't know. We'll see. Overall, power level and the mechanics, I'm pretty excited for. So
yeah. I think it's. I don't know. I'm always a big fan of these big event moments. We talked about it even in the pre-show in regards to Marvel. So I'm really hyped. I think this set, like, I think it feels mechanically like it's sticking the landing. I think story wise, people can get into it. I think that it did a very good job, and then just how things are released is maybe not how I would have done it. But I'm excited to see kind of just where this ends up going, and I'm excited for March of the Machine Aftermath. And yeah, absolutely. Thanks everyone. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to our patrons. Thank you, Ben. Make sure to follow I'm at Kess Wiley on Twitter. Ben is at Ben Bateman Media. If you want more Magic content throughout the week, or my like hot takes on cards individually, I'm also doing TikTok content, about 5 episodes a day. So make sure to check that out as well. And we will see all of you next week.
Bye, guys.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.